Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Terence McKinney of believing that them girls down in San Antonio are still too skinny. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, coming at you following UFC 317. It was good. Sitting here with my mouth ironically agape, when you book good fights on a card, normally turns out good. Who knew? But it was a banger, and as I said last week when I came back from my holiday, having skipped 2 dreadful cards, I only care about bangers now. Only bangers. It was going to be banger shit only, but I've gone only bangers instead. So I wrote a big piece about Ilia Topuria ahead of this fight, and you can read that on the Patreon. And I might write something about the fights later this week, or I'll start working on the 318 stuff. Because the UFC is putting out these... Like, the whole thing is, if you say these cards are bad, people say, well, they're just advertising for the pay-per-views. They're free cards. You should be thankful. So free cards are now getting my half-arsed effort, and actual cards are getting my actual effort. And I'm sure my mental health will thank me. Main event, Ilia Topuria proves that he's him. He's the guy. He's the new Conor McGregor. He's still stealing lines from the old Conor McGregor, but that's neither here nor there. Fights Charles Oliveira, smokes him 1 round. Very impressive. Sort of, I think a lot of people expected it to be either this or Charles blowing him out, because that's the Charles Oliveira thing. Like he's always been, even during his title run, he's always been a bit fragile. He'll get clipped and dropped and stuff, and his brilliant grappling sort of saves him in that big nog Heath Herring sort of way. I realise that many of my audience are now going, what the hell does that mean, old man? And Heath Herring and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira had 2 great fights in Pride. When they came to the UFC, they were both washed, but they had a rematch. Heath Herring lost both the previous fights. Head kicks Big Nog, sends him to the mat, goes to run in, but he's already been submitted by Big Nog, and Big Nog is famous for submitting people from his guard. So Heath Herring stands back and goes, get up. And Nog takes a while to stand up. He really milks it. And then he carries on and wins the fight by decision because Heath Herring was scared to jump on him. And there's a little bit of that with Charles Oliveira. People knock him down and then they jump on him and they go, oh, but do I want to be here? I think this stuff showed some interesting things about Topuria exploitably that we've talked about. And something I forgot to mention on the last podcast, but I'll talk about anyway. And it also showed about a lot of what is great about Topuria. He did not look big in this fight. He looked like a featherweight coming out to lightweight. He didn't look... Well, there was a video of him hugging Pantoja backstage, and he looked only a little bit bigger than Pantoja. So it's really impressive that he's gone up to lightweight and had success there. And Charles Oliveira was trying to wrestle him, and he was still strong enough in the clinch to break free and do his work. Did not like Charles Oliveira's... I'm going to say that his idea was okay, his execution was not. He came out with the idea that he was going to throw long front kicks to the body, which... thumbs up, that worked well. And calf kicks or low kicks to the lead leg. And that did not work very well because he just sort of threw them naked and Topuria was waiting on them and then he'd jump up the middle with a jab. Badly timed low kicks are an invitation to punch you on one leg because you are not going to be able to dodge very effectively on one leg. The fight between Nico Price and Jacoby Smith, watch that one back and see how many times Nico Price throws an inside low kick. It lands, but it's an inside low kick, so it doesn't do much. And Jacoby Smith just twats him with the right hand straight off it. I think he got dropped twice off it, or at least wrestled onto his back because he was on one leg and Jacoby Smith caught it and punched him. So Oliveira got caught up the middle quite a few times, throwing low kicks, because they were moving around and then he'd stop and low kick. And it's like, that's no hiding it at all. One of the things that people love about the calf kick is that it can be sort of a naked lead because it's got a bit of a longer range than a traditional low kick to the thigh. But if you're moving, and then you stop to throw the calf kick, people see that. And good fighters like Ilia Topuria will jump up the middle. Oliveira tried to wrestle him down and then he ended up on his own back in guard. And he opened his guard to start working, slid his knee in front of Topuria's bicep, and the things that he does to threaten the triangle and the omoplata. And Topuria was up to his feet in an instant, which is a great advantage of being like the shorter man in a fight. You can jump up to your feet in a lot less space. Great one is Kid Yamamoto back in Shuto. He could just he punched people in the face on the floor from standing without bending over. It's really weird to watch. But Oliveira pushes his knee in front of Topuria's shoulder. Topuria immediately pushes the leg past and passes his guard straight into side control. And everyone went, oh my God, that's pretty impressive. I think Oliveira didn't expect him to want to engage on the ground. And because he's so used to people backing up as soon as he starts attacking them. He's got a very aggressive guard. And that means putting your feet on the hips a lot and pushing the guy away. And if you put your feet on the hips and the guy stands and slides them past himself, you can end up losing your guard altogether. Topuria steps over the arm and gets himself into a mounted crucifix, or I think BJ Penn used to call it beatdown position. And before that, I think people called it the Salivary, because Ivan Salivary was the guy who made it famous. But it's knee over the arm from side control. Use your head and the underhook to pin the other arm, and you start elbowing the face. Valentina Shevchenko picked up some finishes with it. It's a really bad position to be in. And I was last week I was watching Gary Tonin just put out a new instructional on escapes, which I thought, got to watch that, because Gary Tonin is known as a master of escapes, even in matches against much bigger people like Yuri Samosh. And it's very telling that he shows like 8 escapes from various side control configurations, then says, we've got to touch on this mounted crucifix. It's really bad, and there's not really that many good ways out of it. But I liked what Oliveira did here, because he was able to pass the one leg off to inside his legs in sort of a half guard. So he was in half guard with his arm pinned, and then he pendulumed his legs across his body, and he was able to reap the leg. The leg that was trapping his arm, he was able to reap it and start attacking it in the way that I'm always talking about with him and Pantoja. When it's like a leg locking technique, it's part of a leg locking technique, but the important part is that you use your leg around theirs to turn their knee in. And as soon as their knee's turned across themselves enough, they can't really hit you very well. And so that's what happened in this sequence. Topuria, I think he stood and then he fell over, and he had to turn away and wasn't able to hit Oliveira during the scramble. And then he came back in when Oliveira lost the knee and hit him in the face. So it was a good illustration of something we're always talking about on the podcast. They got back on the feet. Oliveira threw a nice little uppercut with his rear hand to try and catch Topuria with his head low. And then they stepped in, and Topuria hit him with 1-2 on the chin. Right hand on the chin, straight right, unusual for Topuria, and knocked him out. One of the reasons you saw the straight right in this fight work successfully was because Charles Oliveira is not going to jab. He's not going to use his reach and try and land a point and get out. He's going to enter with his hands, grab your head, and then try and knee you or move into the clinch or whatever. He's a forward sort of fighter. And Topuria spent his last 2 fights fighting in and out sort of fighters. Both two of the best jabbers in the division in Volkanovski and Holloway. So he spent his time in those 2 fights trying to crowd them and slip inside the jab and throw his right hand across the top and collapse that distance as he did so. In this fight, because Charles Oliveira is just coming in with 1-2s and standing right in front of him, he was able to just stand on top of him and throw a shorter right hand. And of course, he surprised himself when he knocked him out. It wasn't like that was the perfect shot that he'd been planning. He was just in an exchange with Charles Oliveira, who gets into a lot of exchanges. But very impressive and very significant to the current landscape of the UFC. They are desperate for something that people care about. And Ilia Topuria, it looks like he should be that. We are in a bit of a weird situation now where the featherweight champion is held. The featherweight champion's a guy who lost the belt and didn't win it off the champion. And the lightweight champion now didn't win his belt off the champion either, which kind of undermines how people view the belts. But, what are you going to do? Co-main event was Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. Rematch of an exhibition fight that they had on The Ultimate Fighter. And a week earlier, Pantoja had beaten Moreno on The Ultimate Fighter as well. They really pack him in, those matches. I think this brings Pantoja to 10-0 over the top 5 or top 10. Bonkers, mate. I said in the pre-fight stuff that I wanted to see both of them work the body. Kara France, because I know he can work the body well with his jab and his right straight, and that Pantoja does slow down. Against Royval, and I think even the Usyk fight, he basically takes round 4 off. He's got to sort of get through round 4 and then have a strong round 5. But Pantoja, I said, he's a jab, an overhand, or a jab, a right hand, and a right low kick. Having forgotten his kickboxing masterclass against Manel Kape, where he threw lots of body kicks. So I said that he probably wouldn't get to the body much, but he came out and threw body kicks immediately, which I loved. His striking is still, he does show little shades of picking things up. He did a double jab and then he bowed his elbow out like he was going to shoulder roll, but his shoulder was nowhere near his chin. He added a left hook in his last fight or the one before, can't remember, but he shows little bits where he's picking stuff up. But a lot of it is head down, front crawl, or what do you call it in America? Freestyle? Whatever the swimming stroke is. Head down, arms over top, and then running into low kicks and stuff. And I mean, that's literally how he got him down in round 2. He did head down, right, left, running forwards, and then he tripped him over the leg. It's crazy. It's that weird mixture of chaos and slickness that makes Pantoja who he is, because once he gets a hold of people, if he gets behind you on the fence, no one talks about this. The commentary were talking about all sorts of bollocks, except the fact that it's pretty unusual that a fighter can get the back body lock and just sit down between you in the cage. No one else in MMA is doing that, and they're busy just rambling about some other nonsense. And that links in with another cool thing about Pantoja. Anytime you watch a jiu-jitsu match on YouTube, you know, when guys are berimboloing and doing all that stuff, someone in the comments is like, oh, Helio's spinning in his grave, which is always silly because Helio was about collar chokes from closed guard and holding closed guard for 90 minutes. But it's even funnier because people are like, oh, that wouldn't work in a real fight. That doesn't pass the Gracie filter, so on and so forth. The crab ride stuff is all really up its own arsehole, berimbolo related stuff. And Pantoja's using it at the highest levels of MMA against guys who want to take his head off. Crab ride is, for the layman, when you're behind someone and you put your feet in like butterfly hooks inside their thighs, normally seated on the floor, but you can do it when they're in the turtle, which is where it comes from in wrestling, the crab ride, but seated is more common in jiu-jitsu. And it's the reason that Pantoja can get the back body lock along the cage, put himself between the cage and the opponent, and sit down with them in his lap. And then DC's going like, oh, Kai Kara-France is doing a great job of making height here, and then he just gets the hooks put in and he's stuck in back control and body triangled. And then Rogan was going on for ages about, oh, he needed to switch sides to get on to put his body on the side of the body triangle to put pressure on the foot, which is real old school stuff now. Basically, anyone who's good at holding a body triangle or using the body triangle, if you change sides onto the side where it's locked, yeah, it's uncomfortable on their foot, but they're not going to like tap out from it. And people don't just release it because you made their foot uncomfortable. More likely, they're going to try and belly down you. And if you belly down in a body triangle, you're getting choked and beaten over the back of the head. It's quite an old-fashioned way to think. Gordon Ryan was moaning about this a while ago because he was watching Hulk Barbosa versus someone else, and he got in a body triangle from the back and he tried to like deadlift his way out. But there are a lot of guys out there who have pretty good body triangle escapes now because it's so common. So a great example would be the B team do a ton of this stuff. Ethan Creniston does a ton of this stuff. But J-Rod against Tynan Dalpra, I think I talked about this on a Filthy Casuals guide the other day. They get onto sort of one hip, they wedge the opponent's knee in place, and then they scissor their legs and turn their hips over so that they turn around inside the body triangle. Which ironically, I think they probably got from MMA, because in MMA, everyone is trying to turn back into the opponent when they've got when their back's taken, rather than trying to escape and get back to a guard or whatever, which is more common in jiu-jitsu. And it was one of those sequences, sitting down along the cage into crab ride and then getting on the back, that Pantoja got the rear naked choke in and scored the finish. What is there to say about Kai Kara-France's performance? I mean, he survived decently. His wrestling was okay, but he landed a couple of nice body jabs, which is what I always like from him. He uses the body jab to set up big swings with his right hand, and he also just does damage with the body jab. But he basically didn't get much time to work. He was just, Pantoja got in his face from the opening bell and stayed there. And it works so well because Pantoja is really good as a grappler and a wrestler, and he's strong for the weight class and pretty big for the weight class. If you add into that, like the refusal to let the opponent have a chance to do what they want to do, makes it very hard to deal with, to contend with. He's a very different fighter to Merab, but Merab works on the same principle. If you are always on offense, very hard for the opponent to get going. I mean, the very first run to the cage in this fight from the first round, Pantoja comes out against a dangerous counterpuncher and a big hitter, a guy they've just been telling you is the biggest hitter in flyweight now that Davison Figueiredo's gone, and he charges him. And it's not like Kai Kara-France stops trying to counter. He's trying to counter, but it's a lot harder when guys are just trying to overwhelm you. Counterfighting works best when guys want to stand back and they go, oh, we might counter, and then they bite down on their mouthpiece once every 2 minutes to take a big swing at you and they get hit in the face. Overwhelming the counter striker is probably the most common way that counter strikers or counter fighters end up losing or looking bad. Then there was the opposite of that in the Joshua Van versus Brandon Royval fight, where Brandon Royval just put a ton of volume out, but most of it was useless. And Joshua Van accepted the volume and then just landed big counters. And that was the whole fight. No grappling, no takedown attempts, just Josh Van landing the counter left hook on a rangy southpaw, which is hard to do, but the rangy southpaw kept throwing with such volume that he ended up getting himself in over his head. And a lot of the nonsense volume out of range didn't really seem to bother Van. I will say, go watch this fight. Josh Van, almost in answer to everything, because he's so short compared to Royval, but almost in answer to everything, he leans back to his right every single time. And I'm just going, please throw a 1-2 high kick. Just catch him leaning back. And unfortunately, Royval was busy doing 1-2 right uppercut from right on top of him, get clipped by a counter left hook. Royval had decent success grabbing the head and throwing some knees at some points, but he didn't really go to it a lot. It's tricky because, I was saying last week, reaching for the head can be pretty dangerous. That's how Volk and Holloway both went out against Topuria, and I really didn't want to see Charles doing it. Even though Oliveira is good at grabbing double collar ties, if you reach for it, if you keep going for it, the guy can just swing over the top. So Josh Van, I think it's more important to talk about the effects of that fight and the significance of it than what happened in it, because what happened in it was a ton of nothing from Brandon Royval and some good counters from Josh Van. And then Royval went back to his corner and Alexander Hernandez is there. And I'm like, oh, he does the same thing. Just bollocks for no reason. Intense nothing is how I describe it. But this means Josh Van has fought 6 times in 12 months, which is unbelievable. He has climbed into, I think most people agree he's the number 1 contender now. He's done that in about 3 fights, I think, since he got knocked out by Charles Johnson. Came out of nowhere. And I think the really interesting thing is that people saw this guy coming up and almost immediately said, yeah, that guy's something special. Some guys surprise you, but if you see a really talented guy coming up in MMA, you can be like, that's a very talented guy, because I think the field is not, we are sort of starved for big prospects, particularly at the moment, because of how the UFC has run things and because of the shitty pay situation largely. It's not a very attractive sport for people. It should be evolving constantly, and certainly strategies and tactics are, but the level of athlete we're getting in and the level of prospect is not really, outside of a few guys who were mainly on this card, matching the fame of the UFC and the promise of being the fastest growing sport in the world. Remember that? Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. Oh my goodness. I was on team damn Benny, if only he weren't washed. And he did get dropped early. It was a little jab with... it was nice because Moicano jabbed and did a little duck and he brought his feet up and then he threw the right straight stepping again. So he covered a lot of ground and Benny was leaning back against the cage. And he knocked him down. And I saw people call it a flash knockdown, but it was a good knockdown. He got caught badly out of position with a good punch. But after that, Beneil Dariush looked great. And his takedown defense was as spectacular as it's always been. That's why I was always like, oh, I'd love to see this guy against Makhachev. Oh, he's lost. Damn, there goes his 8-fight winning streak. And then he's out for 2 years due to injuries and then Moicano getting rebooked against Makhachev. But he's always been nearly impossible to take down. Mateusz Gamrot had no success against him. I think he's 82, 85% officially on takedown defense, but he's done it against guys like Carlos Diego Ferreira, Mateusz Gamrot, guys who are really pursuing the takedown strongly, and he just doesn't let him have a thing. And some of them, like Ferreira and Moicano in this one, end up falling onto their own back in the course of trying to muscle him off balance. And then he floats around on top of them. Moicano did exactly what Carlos Diego Ferreira tried to elevate him and get to legs, and Beneil Dariush cartwheeled over the top of him, hid his legs up by his butt. It was like, no, nothing for you, mate. Not great on the ground and pound. Old Benny, which, if you saw his fight with Charles Oliveira, it was pretty glaring that Oliveira couldn't get him down. Oliveira ended up on the bottom, and you went, oh dear. And then Beneil Dariush starts punching, and he's hitting the floor next to Charles Oliveira. And when he does hit Charles Oliveira, his hands make the sound of the squeaky children's mallet. Just not a great hitter on the ground, which is crazy because he hits pretty hard on the feet. I really liked I've always really liked Benny's jab. He used it fantastically against Barboza. But in this one, he came out in the second round, hand fought lead hand to lead hand with Moicano. 1, 2, 3 taps on the lead hand, and then he dips his lead shoulder inside of Moicano's and jumps up the center with a jab. Overhand and left body kicks were always Benny's stock and trade, and he's going for them constantly. And then Moicano's gas tank just disappeared. Round 2, he just stopped doing anything. So he had a pretty good round 1, where he had Dariush on the edge of being stopped. And then Beneil Dariush just came out and continued to do the same things in round 2 and 3, but Moicano had nothing. So crazy to see old Benny Dariush, old Benny Longback, they call him, get another win, but he's still very good. And I was talking about this on the preview podcast. I was saying, you know, the chin is something that goes far. Once it goes, you've got real problems. And the power is supposed to be like the last thing to go. And the athleticism goes quickly, and speed and reflexes. But I didn't know if being a hoss in the clinch would be one of the skills that stuck around for a long time. And then I thought back to like Francisco Trinaldo, and that was his big thing. He was just a hoss in the clinch. Guys would like dive in for takedowns, hit him and go, ow, my neck, as he pulled them up off his legs with one arm. And that's what Beneil Dariush looked like here. He looked like old man Trinaldo, which is a great thing to look like. Shout out to Trinaldo. I didn't even mention it on the last podcast, but he won a dirty boxing fight, whatever that is. He won that in like 30 seconds against someone who seemed to be twice the size of him. But again, Francisco Trinaldo has fought like the best people in the world. Once he was 40, he was still doing that. He's not going to lose to some randomer. So what's next for Benny? I don't know. Maybe we have like a career renaissance. Moicano was on a little career renaissance of his own, and if Benny can steal some of that momentum, that'd be lovely. Bounce back from those 2 losses back to back, Oliveira and Sarukin. Again, that's like the second and third best guys in the division. Peyton Talbott versus Felipe Lima. I mean, we all looked at this one and said that's a really good matchup, mate. This is what I want to see more of. I do not want to see Malcolm Wellmaker fighting Chris Moutinho, who's been brought back just to get a knockout on this guy's record in front of a hometown. I don't want to see Jacoby Smith fighting the ghost of Nico Price as the largest betting favourite in UFC history and still looking bad. I want to see hot shit prospects fighting each other on pay-per-views. And I got that. And it was great. Peyton Talbott had some stuff to do to make up for last time where Hany Barcelos was able to ragdoll him a bit on the ground. Felipe Lima was very hot coming into this one. He'd stopped filthy cheat Muhammad Naimov, and he'd just beaten Miles Johns by decision. And he was the reigning Octagon champion when he left too, so he's a very promising guy. But man, Talbott got the measure of him pretty quick, I thought. I was writing something about Talbott a while ago, and I don't think I ever finished it or really followed through, but he's an interesting character because his striking is not how you would teach someone to strike. But it has some of the principles that make good striking good. He does a lot of jab and pull, or jab and step back, or lead and then pull, which I was watching Samart talk to Sylvie about that, and he was saying like that was how he landed most of his best punches, both in Muay Thai and boxing, where he was the best at both. Just jab, step back, immediately counter, because the opponent's going to swing back. But it was getting him into trouble here because Talbott would throw his jab, pull up a bit short. He really reaches on his jab and his right straight a lot of the time. He throws that weird Conor McGregor right straight where his shoulders are well forward of his hips, his head's really far forward. And you're going, that's a horrible punching position. You can't follow up on that very well. But it does mean you can reach well forward and touch the guy and then pull back onto your stance. And it also means that your legs are well back if he tries to shoot underneath your punch. So if you watch McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez, I mean, he did it against Floyd Mayweather and caught him a couple of times because it was just a weird punch. They don't be teaching you to punch like that in good boxing gyms. But it means that Talbot can do that, like poke a guy from a mile away and pull up short when they swing back. So that worked a few times for Talbot, but in the early going, Felipe Lima, every time that Talbot stepped into jab, he'd go 1-2 or jab overhand and really commit, or like 2 punches coming back. And Talbot would pull, the jab would come and he'd go, right, I'm countering, and he'd walk onto the right hand, which was kind of interesting. He's got a cast iron chin though, which you knew if you watched any of his fights against like Cameron Simon or back in A1. He just walks forward and like he's got good reactions and he reads things and slips things well. But if you hit him, he's just like most guys who are defensively skilled. You go, oh, that's unfair. I hit him clean and he's also got a really good chin. Couple of back kicks as Felipe Lima was circling the cage. Talbott timed him with the back kick, which we love, herding into back kicks. Talbott's ring cutting is pretty good, I would say, probably among the better that you see in MMA. He does sort of follow the guy around the ring a lot, but he will step across and meet him and pressure him. And it's something you have to be like unafraid of getting hit to do, because you have to use your presence. Most people want to fight in like a bladed stance where they're harder to hit, because that's the logical thing to do. Whereas to cut someone off the cage, you have to be there. You have to be taking up as much of the ring as possible. Felipe Lima kept going for this spinning back fist when he was under pressure, and it was one of those ones where you could see the guy build the read in real time. So the first one, he comes back with a spinning back fist off the cage, and Talbott just about rolls his head offline and takes the stink off it. Next time, Talbott has his arm up. Next time, Talbott has his arm up. And then the fourth time, Talbott counters him while he's got his back to him. It did help that Lima kept reaching for the cross-hand check, the one we talked about in the article about Ilia Topuria. He used it all the time against Max Holloway, where you reach across left hand to left hand. He kept doing that to try and set up the spin, and Talbott would go, no, and just step back. Or rip the hand down and throw the right hand. As we said, like when you're looking for that stuff, trying to cross hands and cross swords with the guy, you can leave yourself wide open to getting hand trapped and punched if you reach out ahead of yourself coming into an exchange or coming into an engagement. Once you've disengaged, you reset, and if you reach out first, the other guy can slap it out of the way and hit you. Grappling was really fun. Felipe Lima with a cool rolling leg entry. Peyton Talbott, though, ended up in top half guard, flattened half guard quite a lot. Was defending the takedowns well, stepping over and ending up in mount at one point. Felipe Lima got on the bottom of the mount and he hit the TK scissors, which is where you push the guy under the armpits and throw your legs up over your own head. You do the Marilyn Manson, try and suck your own dick and get your legs in front of them, and you start entering on a leg. A few sort of leg entries as defense here, which is what we're always talking about. I also really liked Felipe Lima when he picked up the single, pulled it across his body, and hit like an Uchimata on the standing leg. Loved that. So yeah, Lima looked worse in this fight. Peyton Talbott, clear winner, in my opinion. But I wouldn't hold that against Felipe Lima. He's a young prospect, just like Peyton Talbott, and they can be having the odd bad fight. And Peyton Talbott looked fantastic. I do think Talbott was helped along by the fact that Lima, while a grappler, his wrestling is not the strongest, and also he doesn't really have a lot of pop on the feet. Or bonk, as we say. Does he have bonk? Not really. Gregory Rodriguez versus Jack Hermansson was a sad one. Gregory Rodriguez coming off a loss to Jared Cannonier, which was a really fun fight. Stood out in months of just bad cards. That was a really good one. Or fight in, the main event of that card was a good fight. And Jared Cannonier looked great in it, and had to face some adversity and came back with... It was really nice what he was able to do. He was able to use some volume to throw off Rodriguez, who was looking for like big counters coming forwards. Hermansson here, one of the things that you got was like his defense looked pretty good. He was covering, he was shoulder rolling, he was getting his forearms high. And then he would drop his hands and look like, can I get a punch back? No. But his chin would come up and his eyes would, he'd be eyes wide, chin up, hands down. And you were going, oh, that doesn't portend well. I think Dean Thomas talked about him like every time he threw his own punches, his chin came up and he looked out of sorts. He looked good on defense, and then it was in the changeover that he looked bad. But I think he got caught here. He was reaching with his right hand to parry jabs and things, and he got caught with the left hook on the chin. Spark out. Rodriguez stands over his unconscious body and then hammer fists him in the face, which, I like Gregory Rodriguez as a fighter, but that puts you on my shit list. Just the old Hendo special, the old Ngannou special. I get that your adrenaline's flowing, but if the guy's like staring up at the ceiling or into the top of his head and flat on his back and not doing anything, you can tell. Jose Delgado versus Hyder Emil. This one was over before it started. I mean, it was like 26 seconds. I did like what Delgado did. He did a body jab they had a good little scramble first with one of the guys hitting a power twist in the clinch and the other guy scrambling up. But Delgado threw a body jab right hand to the head and came up with a left hook. And it looked like he hit him, but in the replay he didn't. And the left hook he immediately turned into a collar tie and grabbed the head and kneed. One of the advantages of being taller is that you can just throw up them knees from almost anywhere. And he happened to catch Hyder Emil up the middle. These things happen. Not going to say lucky punch or lucky knee, because he threw it with the intention of hitting him in the chin, but These guys throw everything with the intention of hitting the other guy in the chin, and it very rarely works out that well. That early. Tracy Cortez versus Vivian Araujo. It was a Tracy Cortez fight. Terence McKinney versus Borshev. I said this is a perfect fight for both because at least Terence McKinney will never try and take Borshev down, which is Borshev really needs to be competing in 4-ounce kickboxing, but the UFC don't offer that. Terence McKinney comes out. Borshev back kicks him. Borshev throws a low kick. Terence McKinney grabs it and runs through. Starts working on Anaconda. Ends up on top in a mounted guillotine and strangles Borshev into submission. Terence McKinney's crazy. He's successfully taken the Bob Sapp model and he's doing it legitimately. Bob Sapp used to try for the first 10 seconds of a fight to knock the other guy out. And then he'd go, I'm getting paid either way, and lay down if you met any resistance. Terence McKinney doesn't do it that badly, but if it gets past like halfway through the first round, he basically goes, I hate this. I hate having to fight more than 1 minute. Think I'll get submitted and come back in 2 months. But he's doing well. He's doing well for himself. So good on Terence McKinney. And a new wrinkle to his game, because normally he's just trying to bang people out. Jacoby Smith versus Nico Price. I mentioned this already, but very underwhelming performance by by Jacoby Smith, who was extremely hyped, and Nico Price is extremely washed. And then Jacoby Smith managed to gas himself out, just dominating this man. And Nico Price is landing like inside low kicks that do nothing, and the commentators are going, he's so unorthodox, as he gets blasted on one leg. There was a weird thing in this fight that was quite interesting. Nico Price looking for Americanas from the bottom of guard, which I've seen used decently. You can use it to sort of set up other things, but Overeem was able to do it against Mark Hunt. This was before he was as enormous as he got, but it was Mark Hunt on meth too, so it wasn't like the most legit win. But Americanas from inside your closed guard, typically you can't push the guy's hand out far enough outside his shoulder, behind his shoulder. But what you can do is then like use him pushing back into you to sweep the arm across the body and climb into a top lock, corner lock, whatever you want to call it. Start working towards an arm bar on that arm. I've also seen, I think it was Overeem did this too, where you work on the Americana on one arm and you start climbing on the other side. You swing your hips out on the other side and try and climb for an arm bar. Nico Price kept opening his legs and sort of letting Jacoby Smith pass to half guard on the side that he was attacking the Americana, which was very weird because he started like looking like he was threatening Smith, and then it would just turn useless and he'd end up in the bottom of half guard and eventually turning to his knees and giving his back and getting choked. But it was very interesting because like there aren't a lot of answers to the guy putting his hands on your bicep ties from closed guard. And Nico Price was able to feed that grip to the Americana grip several times in this fight. It was similar to something that Javier Vasquez teaches. In fact, I think he put out a instructional called the Ground and Pound Safety Manual. But he uses his bicep, which the opponent's hand is on, to pass it to the hand behind their head, and then he has sort of an upward grip on it and starts working on a 2-on-1. Very interesting. Nothing came of it, but it was very interesting. And this is how actual developments in fights are made. Very, very good fighters on the way up see weird fighters on the way down doing something unsuccessfully, and they go, I'll give it a go in training, see how it works, and it catches on. The other thing that annoyed me about Smith was that I've seen him throw nice hands in some of his fights. He smoked a guy in the first minute with a lovely 1-2-3 along the fence. But this one, he just came out and it was like he knew the betting line because he dropped his hands and like both hands down by his waist and jumped forward with a left hook, never bringing his right hand back up. So he throws a leaping left hook, gets jabbed in the face and throws another leaping left hook. And luckily, he's an athlete in his prime and Nico Price is an old man and he just sort of bullied him to the fence. But you're looking at that going, if you do that to someone who is also in their prime and a good fighter, you're going to get smoked. And oh my God, the cardio. Gassing at the start of round 2 in the welterweight division. So I'm still hot on him because he does cool stuff, like that knee crunch thing that he did where he jumped on the back of the guy's knee. And he's got power in his hands, but this was supposed to be a showcase and it was dreadful. And then there was a heavyweight fight to begin with, which I didn't watch, but people tell me wasn't that bad. So if you if not that bad for a heavyweight fight sounds like your cup of tea, you are free to punish yourself with that. That'll do us for this week. Go read the Ilia Topuria article from before the fight, talking about his low kicks, how he lines up his right hand over jabs. his hand fighting, which was particularly interesting in the Holloway fight. Oh, and I still haven't talked about elbows against Ilia Topuria, but I'll do that next time, I suppose. So yeah, get on the extra stuff on the Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy, and I'll be back later in the week for the boys, and next week for everyone else. Cheers. Out of camp Paddy Pimblett being the least intimidating visual of your life. Bless.